This is the story of a man who looked like promise, but became the embodiment of evil. He wasn't born Ted Bundy. Not at first. On November 24, 1946, a boy named Theodore Robert Cowell entered the world in a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont. From the very beginning, his life was wrapped in secrecy. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was young, unmarried, and living in a time when that alone could destroy a family's reputation. The identity of his father was uncertain, never clearly established, surrounded by rumors that would linger for decades. To avoid scandal, a decision was made, a decision that would shape everything that followed. Ted would be raised not as a son, but as a brother. His grandparents would present themselves as his parents. His biological mother would become his sister, and for years he believed it. Imagine building your entire identity on a lie, only to have it unravel. At some point, whether as a child or a teenager, Ted discovered the truth. And when he did, something shifted. Trust fractured, identity blurred, and the foundation beneath him cracked. The household itself offered little stability. Accounts describe his grandfather as strict, unpredictable, sometimes volatile. The environment was tense, filled with emotional undercurrents a child could feel but not understand. His grandmother struggled with mental health. There were moments of instability, of fear, of confusion. For a developing mind, it was the perfect storm: secrecy, tension, and emotional inconsistency. And even at a very young age, there were signs. A story often repeated within the family describes a strange incident when Ted was just a toddler. An unsettling moment involving knives placed around a sleeping relative. At the time, it was dismissed. Later, it would be remembered differently, not as a harmless childhood curiosity, but as something darker. In 1951, everything changed. His mother left Philadelphia, taking him with her to Tacoma, Washington. It was meant to be a fresh start, a clean slate. There, she met Johnny Bundy, a hospital cook and military veteran. They married, and Johnny adopted Ted, giving him the name the world would come to fear: Bundy. From the outside, it looked like a normal family. A hardworking father, a devoted mother, children growing up together. But appearances can be deceiving. Johnny Bundy tried to connect with Ted, took him fishing, camping, tried to build that father-son bond. But something never clicked. Ted remained distant, detached. Later, he would describe his stepfather as beneath him, less intelligent, less capable. Even as a child, there was a sense of superiority forming. And underneath that, shame. He was painfully aware of their modest lifestyle. He wanted more. He wanted status, respect, admiration. So he began to create it. In school, Ted was smart. Teachers noticed his intelligence, his ability to focus, his potential. But socially, he struggled. He hovered at the edges of groups, watched more than he participated, observed how others behaved, especially those who seemed popular, confident, admired. And then, he learned to imitate them. Piece by piece, he constructed a version of himself the world would accept. Confidence practiced, charm studied, personality manufactured. It wasn't natural, but it worked. Over time, the mask became so convincing that almost no one questioned it. Behind that mask, other behaviors were emerging. He began stealing, not out of necessity, but for the feeling it gave him. Control, power, status. Owning things he hadn't earned made him feel closer to the life he believed he deserved. He was arrested more than once as a juvenile, but nothing serious stuck. No real consequences. And that pattern of slipping through, of avoiding accountability, would follow him. By the mid-1960s, Ted was entering adulthood. He enrolled in college, eventually transferring to the University of Washington. And this is where his transformation accelerated. Gone was the awkward teenager. In his place, a composed, articulate young man. He dressed well, spoke confidently, moved with purpose. He became involved in politics, worked on campaigns, built connections. To the outside world, he was exactly what success looked like: driven, intelligent, promising, a future lawyer. maybe even more. But beneath that surface, something else was growing. During this time, his private world began to shift. He became increasingly fixated on women, watching them, following them, studying them, and not just any women, a very specific type, young, attractive, long dark hair, parted in the middle. This detail would later become chillingly significant, because it wasn't random, it was personal. In 1967, he met a woman who would leave a permanent mark on him. She was everything he believed he wasn't: confident, elegant, from a wealthy background. She represented the life he desperately wanted, and for a time they were together. But eventually, she saw through something. Not fully, but enough. She saw a lack of direction, a gap between who he claimed to be and who he actually was. And she left. For most people, a breakup is painful but temporary. For Ted, it was something else. It was humiliation, rejection, proof that he wasn't enough. And it didn't just hurt him. It stayed with him, festered, transformed. Many believe that moment became a turning point, because after that, the type of woman he targeted never changed. It was as if he was trying to rewrite that rejection again and again. After the breakup, his life unraveled. He dropped out of school, drifted between jobs, lost direction. The image he had built began to crack. But not for long, because Ted Bundy didn't accept failure. He reinvented himself again. By 1969, he had regained control. He entered a new relationship with a woman who offered stability, support, loyalty, someone who believed in him completely, and he used that as he rebuilt his life. He returned to university, studied psychology, graduated, worked at a crisis hotline, helping people survive their darkest moments. Think about that. A man who would become one of the most feared killers in history, spending his nights saving lives. That contradiction is what made him so dangerous. By the early 1970s, everything seemed to be falling into place. He was respected, connected, ambitious. He even reconnected with the woman who had once rejected him. But this time, things were different. He had the power. He had the control. He built himself into the man she had once wanted, drew her back in, and then, without warning, cut her off completely. Cold, detached, no explanation, just confusion. It was calculated, deliberate, a reversal of roles. For him, it wasn't just revenge, it was control. And by that point, control had become everything. Because while he was rebuilding his life on the outside, something irreversible had already begun on the inside. The fantasies he had nurtured for years were no longer enough. Observation turned into planning. Planning turned into action. And by 1974, Ted Bundy crossed a line he would never return from. Young women began disappearing. No warning, no clear pattern at first, just absence. Lives interrupted. Families left searching. Authorities confused. Because the man responsible didn't fit the image they were looking for. He didn't lurk in shadows. He didn't appear threatening. He smiled. He spoke politely. He asked for help. And that was the most dangerous part. For years, the darkness inside him had lived in silence, hidden, controlled, contained within imagination. But there's a pattern often seen in predators like this. Fantasy over time stops being enough. What once satisfied begins to feel incomplete. The mind pushes further, deeper, until eventually the line disappears. And once that line is crossed, there's no going back. By early 1974, Ted Bundy had reached that point. The shift was no longer theoretical. It was real. In January of 1974, inside a quiet Seattle neighborhood, something happened that would mark the beginning of a terrifying escalation. A young woman slept in her basement bedroom. She never saw him enter, never heard him approach. What followed was a sudden, brutal attack. Violent, calculated, and deeply disturbing. He struck without hesitation, left her for dead, and disappeared into the night. Miraculously, she survived. But survival came at a cost. Severe injuries, permanent The moment where fantasy became action, and the reality exceeded everything he had imagined. That feeling, that control, changed him, and from that point on, he wouldn't stop. Just weeks later, another young woman vanished. This time, there was no survival, no second chance. She disappeared from her home during the night, taken quietly, almost surgically. The scene left behind told a chilling story. No forced entry, no loud struggle, just subtle signs of violence. A carefully staged environment, as if someone had entered, taken exactly what they wanted, and left without chaos. It was precise, organized, intentional, and it wouldn't be the last. Over the following months, more women disappeared. College campuses, dorm rooms, late-night walks, public spaces, places that should have been safe. Each case seemed isolated, different locations, different circumstances, but beneath the surface, they were connected. Bundy wasn't impulsive. He didn't act in random bursts of rage. He hunted, carefully, patiently. He observed routines, watched movements, learned patterns, and when he struck, it was deliberate. But what made him truly dangerous wasn't just planning. It was his method, because he didn't rely on force at first. He relied on trust. Imagine being approached by someone who looks completely harmless, well-dressed, polite, soft-spoken, maybe even slightly vulnerable. An injured arm, a sling, cast. He asks for help, carrying something, loading something, just a small favor, nothing threatening, nothing suspicious. In fact, saying no would feel rude. That was the trap, because once the victim was close enough, the illusion vanished. The attack was immediate, overwhelming, and by the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. There was another detail that would later become infamous. A small car, unassuming, easy to overlook, a Volkswagen Beetle. It didn't stand out, didn't attract attention, and that was exactly why it worked. Because inside that vehicle, everything changed. It became a controlled environment, a space where Bundy had complete dominance. And from there, he would transport his victims to locations he had already chosen. Remote, isolated, invisible. At first, there was distance between the crimes. Time to plan, time to prepare, time to blend back into normal life. But as months passed, something shifted. The gaps shortened, the frequency increased. The control he craved became harder to satisfy. What once required patience now demanded immediacy. It wasn't just behavior anymore, it was compulsion. And like any compulsion, it escalated. July 14th, 1974, a warm summer day, a crowded park near Seattle. Families, friends, laughter, a place filled with life. And right in the middle of it, he was there, walking among everyone else, smiling, blending in. But this time, something changed. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was approaching people openly, introducing himself, using his real name, Ted. Multiple witnesses would later remember him. A handsome young man with his arm in a sling, asking for help. Most people declined. Something didn't feel right, but not everyone walked away. One woman agreed to help him. She was last seen walking toward the parking lot. She never came back. And then, he did it again. The same day, same place, same method. Another woman, gone. This time, however, there was something different. Too many people had seen him. Too many details had been noticed. For the first time, the invisible predator had a shape, a description, a name. Witnesses gave statements. Composite sketches were created. And for the first time, law enforcement had something to work with. A man calling himself Ted, driving a Volkswagen Beetle, charming, well-spoken, approaching women in broad daylight. It should have been a breakthrough, and in many ways it was, but it wasn't enough. Because when people began reporting someone they knew, someone who matched that description perfectly, it was hard to believe. Ted Bundy? That Ted? The polite, intelligent, politically involved young man? It didn't fit, and that doubt delayed everything. Bundy's greatest weapon wasn't just his method. It was perception. People saw what they expected to see. A law student, a volunteer, a man with a future, not a predator, not a killer. And because of that, he was given time. Time he would use to continue. By late summer of 1974, Bundy made a move. He left Washington, relocated to Utah, enrolled in law school, questioned him, and that hesitation saved her life. She escaped, and for the first time, authorities had a detailed account from someone who had seen him up close, spoken to him, fought him. It was a critical moment, because now the image was becoming clearer. As reports increased, investigators began connecting the dots. Patterns across states, similar victim profiles, consistent methods. But Bundy was still ahead, moving, adapting, avoiding direct detection, until finally, a routine traffic stop changed everything. Late at night, a police officer noticed something suspicious. A car, a driver attempting to evade attention. He pulled him over. Inside the vehicle, he found items that didn't make sense together. Restraints, tools, objects that individually could be explained. But together, they painted a different picture. The driver gave answers, calm, controlled, convincing, and for a moment, that was enough. He was arrested, but not for murder, not for kidnapping, just suspicion. And then, he made bail and walked free. Again, this was the moment everything could have ended. The moment where the pattern could have been stopped. But it wasn't, because the image of who he was still didn't match what he had done. And that hesitation came at a cost. As pressure built, Bundy adapted. But something else was growing alongside his methods. Arrogance. He believed he was smarter, untouchable, capable of manipulating any situation. And that belief would push him further, into risk, into boldness, into mistakes. Because even the most calculated predator eventually slips. By 1976, the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. Witness accounts, patterns, connections, and finally, conviction. Not for the full scope of his crimes, but enough to put him behind bars. For most people, that would be the end, but not for Bundy, because even in custody, he wasn't finished. While awaiting trial in another state, Bundy made a decision. If he couldn't win inside the system, he would escape it. Given certain freedoms due to his legal involvement in his own defense, he found an opportunity, and he took it. He jumped, ran, disappeared into the wilderness. For days, he evaded capture, living off instinct, driven by survival. But eventually, he was caught, exhausted, weak, but still defiant. Authorities tightened security, moved him to a more controlled facility, assumed the risk was contained, but they underestimated him. Again, because this time he didn't rely on chance. He planned, carefully, patiently. He altered his environment, prepared an exit, and waited for the perfect moment. During the holiday season, when staffing was thin, he made his move, slipped through a carefully created opening, navigated through hidden spaces, avoided detection, and walked out, just like that. No alarms, no immediate pursuit. He was gone, and this time, he didn't stay nearby. He crossed states, moved across the country, until he reached a place where no one was looking for him. Florida. But something had changed. The careful planner, the patient hunter, the controlled predator, was beginning to unravel. He was running, desperate, unstable, and when control slips from someone like that, the results are catastrophic. By the time he arrived in Florida, something was different. For years, Ted Bundy had operated with precision, careful, measured, controlled. But now that control was slipping. He was no longer planning weeks in advance, no longer spacing out his crimes, no longer hiding behind patience. He was running, and when a predator begins to lose control, the violence doesn't just continue, it explodes. January 1978, Tallahassee, Florida, a quiet college campus in the at a sorority house, dozens of young women slept peacefully. It was the kind of place built on trust, on safety, on routine, and that's exactly why he chose it. He entered silently, no announcement, no warning. What followed would become one of the most shocking attacks in modern American history. He moved from room to room, fast, violent, unpredictable. There was no careful luring, no manipulation, no disguise, just raw brutality. In a matter of minutes, multiple victims were attacked. Some survived, others did not. The speed of it all made it even more terrifying, because it wasn't just calculated anymore. It was chaotic, frenzied, and completely unrestrained. This was not the same man investigators had been chasing. Before, he relied on deception. Now, he relied on force. Before, he controlled every variable. Now, he created destruction in a matter of minutes. This wasn't evolution, it was collapse. And that collapse made him more dangerous than ever. Because unpredictability is harder to stop than strategy. And it didn't end there. Just hours after the first attack, he struck again. Another home, another victim, another act of violence. The window between crimes was shrinking. The restraint was gone. It was as if everything he had kept contained for years had finally broken through all at once. And the result was devastation. Weeks later, the violence reached its most tragic point. A young girl disappeared in broad daylight, taken from a place that should have been safe, a school. The search was immediate, urgent, but it was too late. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the community, because this was no longer about patterns, no longer about specific targets. It was about opportunity, and that made the threat even more terrifying. This would become his final known victim, not because he chose to stop, but because time had finally run out. By February 1978, Bundy was no longer the composed figure he once was. He was exhausted, running out of money, running out of options, living day to day, moving constantly, and making mistakes. The kind of mistakes he had avoided for years, until finally, one of those mistakes caught up to him. In the early hours of the morning, a police officer noticed something off. A stolen vehicle, a driver trying too hard not to be noticed. He initiated a stop. What followed was brief but telling. The driver resisted, gave false information, tried to escape. But this time, there was no way out. He was arrested, taken into custody, and when his identity was confirmed, everything changed, because this wasn't just another suspect. This was the man investigators across multiple states had been searching for. For years, Ted Bundy had finally been captured. But even now, he didn't appear like a monster. He smiled, spoke clearly, carried himself with confidence, as if this was just another situation he could talk his way out of. And for a moment, some people still believed it. That's how strong the mask was. Even at the end, when the trial began, it wasn't just a legal case. It was a spectacle, one of the first to be broadcast to a national audience. People watched closely, not just because of the crimes, but because of him. How could someone who looked like this have done something like that? That question drew attention from everywhere, and Bundy knew it. He played to it, smiled at cameras, acted confident, even charming, as if the courtroom were a stage, and he was still in control. He made a decision that would ultimately define his fate. He chose to represent himself. It fit his personality perfectly. He believed he was smarter, more capable, more persuasive than anyone else. And in some ways, he was intelligent. But intelligence isn't enough in a courtroom. Strategy matters, discipline matters, and most importantly, objectivity matters, things he didn't have. As the trial progressed, the case against him became stronger. Witnesses placed him at key locations. Physical evidence connected him directly to the crimes. Details that were too specific, too consistent, too undeniable. Piece by piece, the image he had tried to maintain began to crack. And behind it, the reality became clear. At first, some saw him as confident, composed, even impressive. But as the trial continued, something shifted. His behavior changed, his tone sharpened, his control slipped. Moments of aggression surfaced, moments that revealed something deeper, and the jury saw it, not the mask, but the man behind it. After weeks of testimony, evidence, and arguments, the decision came: guilty on all major counts. The room was silent, but outside, the reaction was immediate, because for many, this wasn't just a conviction. It was confirmation. The man they had watched, analyzed, questioned, was exactly who investigators said he was. The next phase was inevitable. The severity of the crimes left little room for debate. The outcome was clear. He would face the ultimate penalty. And when it was delivered, even the judge acknowledged the contradiction. A man with intelligence, with opportunity, with potential, who had chosen a completely different path. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a statement. But the legal process wasn't over. There were additional charges, another case, another trial, and once again, the outcome was the same: guilty. Another sentence, another confirmation. By that point, there was no doubt left. The system had caught up to him completely. Years passed, appeals were filed, arguments were made, delays were granted. He fought for time, every possible extension, every possible angle, because despite everything, he didn't want to die. The same man who had taken so many lives clung desperately to his own. Even then, he was still calculating, still trying to control the narrative. He offered information, confessions, details about crimes, but never all at once, always in pieces, always with a purpose. Time. He wanted more time, and he used everything he had left to try and get it. As the end approached, he began to speak more openly, admitting to multiple crimes, across different states, providing details that only the perpetrator could know. But even in confession, there was distance. He spoke carefully, sometimes indirectly, sometimes shifting responsibility, because even at the very end, he struggled to fully confront what he had done. As the execution date approached, the reality set in. There were no more appeals, no more delays, no more strategies. For the first time, there was no escape. The confidence faded, the control disappeared. What remained was fear. January 1989. Inside a prison in Florida, the process moved forward, step by step. No theatrics, no performance, just procedure. Outside, a crowd gathered, some seeking closure, some driven by anger, some simply wanting to witness the end of something that had haunted them for years. Inside, it ended, quickly, quietly, and just like that, Ted Bundy was gone. But the story didn't end there, because what he left behind couldn't be erased. Families lost, questions that would never be answered. For some, there was closure. For others, only silence. Because not every victim was found. Not every story was completed. It's easy to focus on the killer, the psychology, the mystery, the contradiction. But that's not where the story should end. Because the real story is about the lives that were taken. Young women with futures, with dreams, with families who loved them. Lives interrupted, not defined by how they died, but by who they were. If there's anything to take from this story, it's this: evil doesn't always look the way we expect. It doesn't always hide in darkness. Sometimes it smiles, speaks calmly, it earns trust, and that's what makes it dangerous. But it can be stopped. It was stopped, not quickly, not perfectly, but eventually, justice caught up. Ted Bundy's name became infamous, studied, analyzed, remembered, but he shouldn't be remembered for who he was. He should be remembered as a reminder of what deception can hide, of why awareness matters, of why instincts should never be ignored, and most importantly, of the lives that were lost, because those lives are the ones that truly matter.